All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. Today's session is about Hyperforce. As part of our sign up, we asked if you are familiar with it. And Jason, we had about half of the people don't know what Hyperforce is. About a quarter have migrated, and about another quarter are preparing to migrate. So that gives you an idea of the audience that we're working with. For me, I'm in the process of getting ready for a migration. It's not scheduled yet, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But because of the large size org that I lead, I want to make sure that we have lots of things done before we actually get that done. And welcome, Steve. Thank you for joining the group. And so, Jason, if you want to introduce yourself and share a little about yourself, you are a speaker today. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Marlene. My name is Jason Okrepke. I'm a senior manager in technical account management. I'm going to be taking you through the Hyperforce technical deck, dive a bit into the technical aspects of Hyperforce. And this was something that Danielle had taken Marlene through. That's how we ended up here today. I've been in the ecosystem for about 10 years now, rolling up on 6 years at Salesforce. And prior to joining Salesforce, I spent 4 years on the consulting side, doing implementations, data migrations, a lot of hands-on keyboard work. I was also a technical account manager. That's how I joined Salesforce for one of Salesforce's top financial services companies. So I've been hands-on before and deep in here, and now I do manage a team of technical account managers.
Awesome, welcome. And I'm definitely biased. Danielle is our technical account manager for my company, and she is amazing. So hopefully, if you guys have the opportunity to work with technical managers, you get somebody as awesome as she is. So
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Marlene. Just take a look at our forward-looking statement here today, and please make purchasing decisions on things that are generally available in Salesforce right now. If we talk about anything that's not generally available, please know to make your purchasing decisions on only those things that are currently available. So we're talking about Hyperforce. Where we are right now, we're in a new world, right? And in the past 2 years, we've endured tremendous hardships. We've experienced innovations, transformations that we never expected so soon. In this new world, we're finding that connecting with our customers can feel harder than ever. You're navigating new trust and safety challenges because your customers have grown and are spread around the world. So you need to scale faster while addressing their security and privacy concerns. You're experiencing compliance and governance challenges because you've expanded your business to new locations, which have differing and new laws and regulations. You're experiencing new team velocity and efficiency concerns because your employees, builders, and IT teams are working remotely and are demanding new tools, processes, and products to innovate. As a Salesforce customer, you're uniquely positioned in this new world with Customer 360. At the core of the C360 is your customer. We believe that everything should be centered around your customer. That way, your sales, service, marketing, commerce, analytics, everything you do is centered around the customer's needs. And the C360 not only provides you a great suite of products and services to serve your customer, but it is built to operate at a global scale with the highest level of security, compliance, and privacy. And the reason why C360 is able to provide you such great value because of the platform it's built on. The foundation of our platform is Hyperforce. It's our newly virtualized infrastructure layer that has been architected to enable all the amazing value you provide to your customers through C360. Hyperforce is our next generation architecture built for the public cloud. It provides Salesforce applications with compliance, security, privacy, agility, and scalability, and gives customers more choice over data residency. Hyperforce provides a new foundation for our clouds, including Sales Cloud, Service, Marketing, Commerce, Industries, and more. So first-party data center versus Hyperforce. When comparing a first-party to Hyperforce, the key thing to note is that it's Salesforce's next platform evolution. As Marlene had mentioned, some folks here have already migrated to Hyperforce. Some folks are in process of the planning. And some of you joined today to learn a little bit more about Hyperforce. Now, today, the major Salesforce clouds are individual stacks from the hardware through the tools, through the applications. This means different tools for building, delivery, monitoring, and networking. Most of these stacks are also in different data centers and locations, integrated through APIs. Hyperforce changes this to drive a common software foundation, common tooling, standardized security application and processes. Now, we will no longer run the physical infrastructure, but run our services on the public cloud provider's hardware instead, which will allow us to easily take advantage of the latest technologies. We can then focus on the Salesforce Customer 360 products instead of focusing on maintaining the infrastructure. We can prioritize evolving our platform, the clouds, the features, and ensure they're compliant, secure, and meeting customer needs. Salesforce Hyperforce. Hyperforce is able to do this because it enables you to serve your employees and customers globally while providing enhanced choice and control for residency and compliance. It's scalable, so you can grow your business, scaling more flexibly and sustainably with Salesforce. Hyperforce is secure by default through industry-leading features such as least privileged control, zero trust principles, and infrastructure as code. Also, because your data is encrypted in transit and at rest. Now, Hyperforce provides comprehensive privacy standards that enables transparency and control of your customers' data. And finally, Hyperforce increases your agility through updates with no downtime for releases and general maintenance. Keep in mind, downtime may be necessary during org migrations and major technology upgrades. Hyperforce also delivers faster dev and test environments and adds tremendous interoperability with AWS. Hyperforce delivers data residency benefits by providing customers with local storage and processing options, which can help comply with local regulations. Localized performance is another Hyperforce benefit. You can co-locate your Salesforce apps alongside your other apps. An example, Hyperforce allows you to operate out of India, even though Salesforce doesn't maintain a data center presence there. We have a very exciting roadmap. We're looking forward to an even more exciting year ahead. We're already live in 12 countries. We're adding 5 new countries soon, and we're working to add new clouds onto Hyperforce. For example, we recently launched Marketing Cloud engagements on Hyperforce in India. And you can see from the Government Cloud side, Government Cloud Plus Defense and Government Cloud Premium are coming soon. One thing we want to take a look at today would be the Hyperforce architecture. When we take a look at the Hyperforce architecture principles, Hyperforce has allowed us to adopt many cloud-native designs, which was groundbreaking for Salesforce, without building everything from scratch. Hyperforce continues to be built with these principles in mind. Infrastructure as code and immutable deployments. What we do is we ensure that everything, including the provisioning of our infrastructure, in this case, the public cloud services, is specified as code and executed by tools. All changes are introduced in complete redeployable units. No in-place changes are possible. This means everything is automated, secure, repeatable, and predictable. As a result, changes are more manageable and allow us to grow and adapt more quickly to our customers' needs. Compliance, key benefit of Hyperforce, it supports compliant efforts. We extended that concept down to the services. They are all designed and operated from the ground up in a way that helps us meet our SLAs, implements our internal security controls, and is architected to support our customers' compliance efforts. Service ownership, our engineering teams are empowered to design, develop, scope, deploy, and run their service independently of other services, and are not bound by constraints imposed on other services' design challenges. This ensures service ownership in which the teams are responsible for the infrastructure requirements, availability, performance, and support of their services, enhancing their customers' experience and defining incident response. The cost to serve. In addition, the services are architected and operating with efficiency and cost optimization as goals. The teams have visibility into cost and are empowered to make business decisions to design their services to reduce waste and inefficiencies. Event-driven ops or observable events and alerts are built into all services. This allows us to set up relevant alerting and threshold settings to monitor and respond to potential issues. It also allows us to use automation to manage workload changes, provision resources automatically, and match the current demand as closely as possible. Zero trust architecture, service-to-service communication is authenticated and authorized, even if services are in the same security groups or network. And finally, service resilience. All critical services architected on Hyperforce are designed for failure across 3 availability zones. So the resilience across 3 availability zones. If we're looking at a couple of definitions here, on the left-hand side, you see a region. A region would have a name, be an example would be US East as we list here. It's a logical cluster of the data centers, and it's multiple physically isolated availability zones. The availability zone are 1 or more discrete data centers with redundant power, networking, connectivity within a region. Provide high availability, fault tolerance, and scalability. Interconnected, high bandwidth, low latency, and encrypted traffic between availability zones. Hyperforce operates in a 3 availability zone model, as I mentioned before, where zone locations are chosen specifically to minimize the latency, while at the same time minimizing the risk. What we refer to as the Goldilocks zone. The distance is great enough to support independence and continuous service availability if there's a major geographic incident, but close enough to facilitate low latency data replication across availability zones. Each availability zone is risk assessed by both AWS and Salesforce to ensure that they are on different risk tangents with no single point of failure and aid in disaster recovery. Independent electricity grids with on-site generators and local fuel agreements to continue running in a disaster. Independent network, distance far enough to mitigate substation outages, distance far enough to mitigate wildfires outages, located in different floodplains, avoidance of 100-year flood zones and mitigation measures for 500-year flood zones, or elevate the site at least 3 feet above the flood level with a preference for 6 feet. Triangulated to minimize chance of multiple impacts during hurricanes, fire and earthquake isolation measures in place. To mitigate outages due to wind, data centers are designed and built for ASCE 7-16 Category 2 for the shell building and Category 4 for rooftop structures. During AWS data center builds, risk assessments are based on computer simulation and modeling of a large number of events, calculating the consequential scenarios and expected impacts, and incorporating historical events for calibration. AWS engages subject matter experts to analyze identified hazards. For example, in India, they evaluated subsurface investigations and uncovered a number of problems with a prospective site. Elemental phosphorus, asbestos, buried effluent pipes, and a possibility of naturally occurring radioactive material. The 3 availability zone model has a low latency approach, ensuring that any issues which do occur can be resolved swiftly. Faster, low latency data sync and therefore faster recovery, and allow us to ensure high availability for our customers and low risk factor. 3 availability zones, high availability, disaster recovery, and the patterns that we've developed to help in this particular offering. So basically, Salesforce and our customers, you, are conjoined in a shared risk model. Salesforce stores our own data for revenue generating services in these data centers, and we ourselves have hundreds of clients sharing this infrastructure. If Salesforce were not confident in the choices and recommendations we have made, then should the worst occur, it would not just damage our customers' businesses, each and every one of you that are here, and obviously we don't want to do that, but it would significantly impact our ability, Salesforce's, to do business both immediately and in the future. We share the risk with our customers and do not take these decisions lightly. Let's take a deeper look at Hyperforce. In the 3 availability zone model, on which we've talked about, and again, this allows us to provide resilient compute and a resilient database combined, meeting the needs of modern enterprises. Storage caches are fast memory level stores, SSD and NVMe, with 3 full copies of the database across the 3 availability zones. A resilient cloud storage resides in S3 and AWS, benefiting from their 11 nines of availability and maintains an additional full copy of the database. So what I want to step through here is an availability zone. It's an example of an outage that could occur in an availability zone. It could be any region. Here, set an example, it's Mumbai. We have the three availability zones. We have A, B, and C. You can see the green lines are our read-write between application servers, primary DB node. We have our secondary DB nodes, and then our fast database storage caches. We have our network load balancer and resilient cloud storage. So here in this example, what we're going to say is that availability zone B is the availability zone that it would experience an outage. So what we're demonstrating here is that outage happens in B. In this instance, availability zone A has now become our primary. Availability zone C is still functioning. Availability zone B will eventually, come back online. But what's happened is everything has shifted to where availability zone A is now primary, and then availability zones B and C are our secondary. So like to conclude here with a brief summary of some of the key differences here is that the public cloud architecture focuses on business continuity and high availability to ensure your applications are available exactly when you need them. One of the key takeaways here is that currently in the 1P model, you basically have two zones of availability. When one fails, we have what's known as a site switch, and you go to your backup. When the outage comes back up, that becomes your secondary. In the Hyperforce model, we have three availability zones. Lastly, I'd like to say thank you to everybody for allowing me to take you on this tour of the architecture of Hyperforce, what we've been doing with Hyperforce, and thank you.
Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate it. And I posted it on the chat, but when I walked my security team through this, they thought it was really great. And I made the joke, of course, about the cloud moving to the cloud. But one of the questions that they had was AWS East region has gone down one day each year for the past 3 years, right? It's just different things have happened that cause that. We assume that the nodes that you just showed us are in one region, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so if the region goes down, it affects every single customer in that region for AWS, and it would affect the whole thing. So that's what I told them, and that's where we are right now. But it was a question. So it's great. It definitely high resiliency until something major happens. So. Does anybody have any questions or any comments?
Marlene,
There's
from
no
a
immediate
customer
questions, or while somebody's thinking of a question, for the folks that haven't evaluated Hyperforce yet, there is a Hyperforce assistant that can help step you through and prepare you for the process. You can refresh and work with support to refresh a sandbox to Hyperforce, or migrate a sandbox, especially if you have large data at scale, and have that sandbox migrated over to Hyperforce. Could be a full copy, for instance, to go through that entire process with the Hyperforce assistant and preparing yourself, running tests, making sure your integrations are working the way they should, to ensure that you'll have a smooth and successful transition to Hyperforce.
And so I see some questions. Is the goal to move everybody over into Hyperforce? I think the answer is yes.
The answer to that question is unequivocally yes.
Is there a timeline for that?
I don't have an exact timeline to when we want to complete that. You would be notified 90 days in advance of when your org is scheduled to migrate to Hyperforce.
Yeah. And Gil, you have a question. What's your question?
Well, that kind of answers part of the question, because I was going to say, what was the migration path, or in your case, as a customer, what are the steps, right, to move into Hyperforce? But I guess since basically this is the underlying foundation, it's almost swapping it, which I know it's not the right term, but it's almost like you're putting in this new foundation in place in order to continue to operate.
The high level process, right? There's the high level process. I would highly recommend, like I said, having a sandbox refreshed or migrated to Hyperforce, and go through the assistant,
right,
and then also run if you have end-to-end tests that you run when you're running a deployment, through your DevOps process. Run those that would test, as I mentioned, test your different objects, your different business processes, and test any kind of like integrations that you have to make sure that everything would go smoothly.
And
Yep.
from a customer perspective, I'm assuming that this is coming from government enterprise all the way down to, small and medium businesses, correct?
It's a process that we recommend for everybody. Yep. Okay. It's not segmented to just one specific business segment.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm going to start presenting the best practices deck, and I'm going to skip through some of those pages. But I know we had a couple other questions, so let me go find Zoom and present that screen, because these questions are coming along. Go. That presentation. I'm going to post both the presentation that Jason just walked us through and this presentation on the meeting page, so you'll be able to download them and see them. So can you guys see my the presentation now?
Yes.
And so this is where Jason was talking about it, right? And I will share with you guys from my perspective. We have been asked to migrate twice, and we've said no twice. And so we've gotten that 90-day notice saying, do you want to migrate? And because we have such a large org, we decided to take this a little bit slower and work with our legal department, work with security, and make sure that we have all of their blessings before we move forward. So I'm in a preparation mode, knowing that we're going to request to move sometime later this year. So some of the things that we've considered are, what are our peak times of the year for I think everybody here knows, but I work for Hertz. And so spring break is pretty busy for us. Summer is massive. And so we're going to try to avoid both of those time periods in order to make sure that we have as little impact to the org as possible. So just like Jason said, we got a 90-day notice saying you qualify for it, and we deferred. We've run through the Hyperforce tool on your org that can walk you through it. Definitely, if you haven't already done so, enable enhanced domains, right? If you haven't done that, you're probably behind. And it's a critical part of what you need to do. You need to run your optimizer. You need to remove hard-coded references to anything, which is the best practice, but I know it happens. And so make sure that has happened, and make sure that you're doing those things, because it's going to matter. And this walks you through how you want to prepare, and then what's going to happen during the upgrade. I'm going to skip a whole bunch of pages because I'm going to tell you what I looked at and I thought, what do I need to do to get ready for this? And so this is the day of migration. For approximately 1 to 2 hours, my org is going to be read only. So depending on your org and what you do with your org, that might be impactful. And so Jason talked about integrations. And so I'm going through, and we have documentation of what the integrations were built, but then somebody added one and they removed one, and just make sure that those things are well documented. We're going to work with Salesforce to put one of our sandboxes in Hyperforce and connect everything into it so we can make sure that everything makes sense. But this is not just about Salesforce. I have dozens of applications that connect to Salesforce. So I'm working with our digital team to say, can you turn off that link during this time period because it might fail if you send that request to Salesforce. And then the other thing that I focused on, Jason and Danielle was fantastic on this. You'll notice this little note here. Please ensure you limit significant changes for 24 hours before migration. I asked, what is a significant change? This includes, of course, any code changes, any configuration changes, that makes sense. But it also includes creating users, deactivating users, changing roles, changing permissions, large data volume changes if you're adding data in bulk, removing data in bulk. Let's say you have an archive process, which I do, and all those things. So I'm going through and I'm putting together a list of all the things we do in our org. Do any of you guys have batch jobs that run on your org? Maybe? Yes? No? I know Marriott does.
Yes, definitely.
And so I'm going to have to turn off those batch jobs 24 hours before migration, let the migration happen, and then turn them back on. So I'm going to work with the development team, because I've done this in the past, to have some code that goes through and says, give me all of the active jobs, delete them, store them somewhere, because when we're ready, we're going to re-enable them, right? Things might run daily, monthly, weekly, whatever they are. I'm going to turn them all off just to make sure nothing runs. All of my ETL bulk jobs that run, we have a lot of activity on our org. I just have to make sure that when we talk about data changes, it's not going to affect us. And of course, working with Danielle, I sent her a summary of things that I can't stop. There are certain things that happen in my org that are going to continue to happen. And so my question right now has been, even during our lowest volume time, here's how many cases we create on a daily basis. Here's the number of inbound email messages, because I can't stop those, right? I'm not going to turn off my org for 24 hours before it happens. So I'm working with my TAM to figure out what that's going to happen. But I didn't know if any of you guys have gone through a migration, or if you're also preparing, what else are you looking at? And I would love ideas. I know, Gerald, you mentioned the government orgs that you're working on. What else are you guys looking at?
For me, I'm not looking at anything yet. We are preparing. We've got some meetings and stuff planned in the near future. So
Okay.
this is my first look at it as we prepare, but it's significant for us
I would think a government
because
org
of the
probably has a
government
lot of
cloud
data.
and DoD and stuff like that.
Yeah. And Jennifer, I know you mentioned you're also, your org is fairly large. You have a lot of data that moves in and out every day. Have you guys started, or is this your initial look at it as well?
We've deferred once as well. And given this presentation, I'm wondering how many deferrals I can do. I know that others on my team have taken a deeper look at this, and given this presentation, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions that they're probably not going to want to answer right away, but they're going to anyway.
No, that's great, Jennifer. And this particular slide is the one that caught my attention. When you enroll for your loyalty membership on Hertz, that's a real-time call that goes into Salesforce, right? So it's one of the things that I'm going to be asking the digital team to say, can you please remove that for the 24 hours this is going to affect us? Because I don't want this to fail, obviously. I'm going to be working with our MuleSoft team to see what can be queued and what they can hold. And again, because of the way that we have Salesforce in the middle of a lot of systems, we're going to have to pause some things and know that we're going to restart them. And by the way, does anybody here have Marketing Cloud?
I was just about to ask, does this affect Marketing Cloud and Pardot?
So
'Cause we
Jason,
have
you might be
both.
able to answer this better, but the answer that I got is Marketing Cloud is not moving yet, but the goal is to move it to be in the same infrastructure, right? And so Jason, I don't know if you know that answer or not.
I do not have the answer to that off the top of my head. I'm on the core side, but I can find out.
Okay. I did ask for, when we qualified for it, Jennifer, that our migration was only for core, not for Marketing Cloud. That would be done separately. But for yours, it might be different. So definitely when you get the notification, I would ask.
Great point. Thank you.
And the reason I asked is because we have transactional emails. The first make it to core, and then they make it to Marketing Cloud. And so one of my questions to Danielle was, hey, my emails the day before, I can't stop reservation emails from going to our customers. That's a decent volume of data that gets created on a daily basis. And so we brought it up to our business stakeholders at transactional emails for this read-only window. They need to be queued. They're not going to be making it to Marketing Cloud for them to be sent. So there's things like that that even within Salesforce, you might want to look at. I don't know about Pardot, Jennifer. So that's technically on core, right?
I don't know. I don't own the work on Pardot, but I know it's integrated to Salesforce, and we have a lot of incoming leads every day through Pardot. And so if that has to happen, then we have to pull down a lot of stuff on our website so that we don't end up adding additional prospects to Pardot for a 24-hour period. That sounds like a major headache.
Yeah, and I would recommend, just like I did, I went through and I looked at how much data we're creating on our core objects. And I sent those to my Salesforce contact and I said, here's what's going on. Is this going to disqualify us from migrating? Because it even says, they're going to be very careful on who gets migrated. And Jason, I didn't get a clear idea of what would cause you to be disqualified if you are on the path to be migrated or not. But obviously, if you deploy something the day before, if you have a deployment, that would disqualify you. And I know for us, we actually were supposed to migrate, I think this week or last week at the end of February. We weren't ready, but I wish we had done it, because if we had done it, we would have completed it before our peak season. And now in working with Salesforce, right, we're going to see what the next window is, but we know for sure, we already said it, since we couldn't do it now, we can't do it until after September. And so working with Danielle, she said that she's going to try to see how she can schedule us, knowing what our data volumes are. We have a sweet spot in September and October when our volume goes down. And then for the holidays, it goes back up a little bit, but not as bad as it does for the summer. I saw some things online where they said, make sure your things like your email DKIM, make sure you've set that up in your core org. Otherwise, you might not be getting the notifications that you need. When you do get moved, you need to sign up for your new environment to get any notifications on if your node is down, or if all the notifications that you get now for I'm on NA164, whatever yours is, make sure you've signed up for that. So there are some little manual things you need to do after the fact. But again, for me, we archive data, maybe, I don't know, it's just 7 million records a week. And so I'm going to have to turn off our archiving policies 24 hours before, make sure things are nice and stable, just let things be, migrate, and then restart it. Jason, I didn't know if there's been any situations where the data, I don't want to say gets corrupted, but I know when I create a sandbox, sometimes some data isn't quite right and it just kind of gets stuck in the middle, right? Because the way that it got captured and was being copied. Do you know how that's being handled for the Hyperforce migrations?
I don't know of any instances where that's happened in the migration to Hyperforce. I do know that as part of the Hyperforce process in the moving orgs to Hyperforce, there are items in place to where if it doesn't pass certain checks, then the migration of those particular orgs would be canceled, if you will, in quote unquote rolled back.
Okay. And my plan right now is that for our ETL processes, where they are querying data, I'm going to let it be because that's a read function. I'm just going to make sure that all of our ETL processes that update data or create it in the system, those are paused. So I need to work with the ETL team as well to make sure that our very long list of ETL jobs goes on hold for basically 24 hours, day and a half at most. So I know, Brock, from your side, you've done lots of things with Salesforce and data, even your, I don't know if you're still doing the deltas every hour on the half hour for our local copy, or if you've changed that, but all of that, the reads would be fine. It's the updates that would be a problem.
No, that type of refresh is still running on a regular basis. So I guess one of the questions I would have with Jason is why is 24 hours of, I mean, like a new user creation seems like a pretty extreme thing that we would say you can't create a user for 24 hours. What prompted a 24-hour migration window of significant change, which, as Marlene's going through, significant change seems a lot more a lot more broad than I would think it would be.
It's a great question. I don't have the answer to that one, not being quite as close as some other folks are to the migrations, folks like Danielle. So I'll work with Danielle and we'll grab the answer to that and get that over to Marlene to be able to share with the group.
Okay.
And what I'll do is I'll also share with you guys, because I asked a significant change, and that's where I have that list. And I agree. I was surprised that creating and deactivating users would cause a problem, because that tends to be low volume. But maybe the question is based on volume. It did have something about no recalculating of sharing, right? And that makes sense, because that could be very large for your org.
Marlene, I have two questions. Oh, I'm
go for it,
sorry, I
Jennifer.
didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
please go ahead.
First, this list that you're talking about, will you make that available, please?
I'll put it, yes, I will. Sorry, I'm going by memory because I had sent Danielle the request and she was awesome at giving me the information, because my question was, obviously I'm not going to change any metadata in the system, because I think that would be a problem. Like that makes sense. But I asked, does it also include data? And that's when she replied back with the list that any bulk operations are definitely included. The problem that I have is because my org is so large, I don't have to do bulk to create large volumes of data. I can create 300,000 email messages in a day, and that creates a times 10 of other objects, right? So then now you're over 3.5 million. It's like, oh yeah, that gets large fast. But I've also seen AWS data, how it handles copying data. It's super fast. And so that's why I'm trying to understand what volume of data it is that we start to see significant issues, or if a couple million is not going to be a big deal. So, and to give an example, one time I exported 895 million records from one S3 bucket to another S3 bucket, and that took 27 minutes. We thought it would take days because we just thought it'd be a long time. And by the time our call was done, we had a notification saying that it was completed, and we said, wait, did something go wrong? And so we had to go validate the data, and everything was fine. So that's an example of AWS data processing from one S3 bucket to another. It was very fast. I have no idea how Salesforce is doing their data copying, but again, it's very performant. What other questions do you have, Jennifer?
My second question was, do these migrations typically happen like on a Saturday night, like a deployment does? Because we have a global instance, and so if it ran in the middle of the night on a Wednesday, that's middle of the day in Asia. So
yeah, Jason, I don't know if you know when they're scheduled. I haven't heard that in particular from Danielle yet, because we're not scheduled yet. When we got the email, we immediately deferred, so we never got to the point of getting it actually scheduled.
Top of my head, I don't know the schedule, but it's something I could look into to see how it's handled in each region.
Thanks.
Yeah. And Jennifer, I have the same issue because we're also global. And so we were talking about what would be the best time for us to actually do this. And we're actually looking not so much at our agents' work, but our customer websites. What are the peaks and valleys of that, just so we have less of a customer impact. But right now we have not figured out our requested sweet spot yet.
Sure. I think it's a little easier being B2B. I understand. Yeah, office hours are basically what I got to worry about.
Yeah, and even for your orgs, right? Even for us, we'll work with the workforce management and say during these 3 hours, you're probably going to get more calls because customers are going to say, where is my reservation email? So you can't reduce the number of people you have because you think it's going to be less data. You may actually get more calls that you can't log. So. All right. And poor Jason, I don't think you expected to be in the hotspot for so many questions, but I still really appreciate your time. I know we've had more questions on the chat. Does anybody have them they want to speak up, or should I go through this? I see the 90-day question. And I don't have a date yet right now, Stuart, but I'm starting the process because I know I need probably 6 months to prepare for this because I have other teams I want to be impacting. So that's my approach. Gerald, what's your question?
When we, in your experience of others migrating, are there certain areas that are giving people more grief than others that we need to, pay special attention to?
I've asked that question of some of my contacts because I work with some large system integrators. And one of the things that I heard is some people didn't realize they were being migrated. And to me, that's funny because it you probably missed a few emails from Salesforce because you get a lot of notifications ahead of time. It doesn't just happen to you, but they just weren't paying attention. It happened. They came in the next day and they had to fix some things. I haven't heard of the problems that they've had. And so as I get more details, Gerald, I'll definitely share them. But I haven't heard of any gotchas yet that I'm aware of. Jason, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
I don't have any specifics. I know some folks accidentally migrated, their org accidentally migrated, they missed the emails and they were fine. I do know that there have been some issues that have popped up with folks that didn't fully test ahead of time. I don't know the details and the specifics into it as much, but overall, in my experience with the TAMs that report to me, customers who have taken the time to prepare, migrated to Sandbox, run through the preparation, have seen very, very, very little to no issues.
Great.
Okay, and finally, I put one in the chat, but when we're doing something big and major, we'd like to try to ensure we have a back door or a rollback option. I suspect that does not exist here, but just want to confirm.
Yeah, as I had mentioned, that was a question that I think Daniel actually had, and we looked it up in real time. And as the process is going forward, there are checks, and if there's any failures in the specific checks, then that would be canceled, and you would not migrate to Hyperforce. It's all built into the process.
Okay, but the process can't complete, and then you look around and do your testing post-migration and find out this is not good. At that point, there's no rollback.
That is correct. Yeah, once you're over on Hyperforce, you're on Hyperforce.
Okay. And for the sandbox, the great sandbox, and we asked the same thing for the sandbox that we're going to move over to Hyperforce to test everything. That's the same thing. And so we were talking about whether we would put a full sandbox in Hyperforce or not. And we decided to not put a full sandbox in there because what if something goes wrong, then it's there and then we can't do anything with it. We're going to do a partial sandbox. So it's the same thing. Before you ask your question, I see, actually, Stephen, you have a question here for what does this mean for the new deployment? And I actually had the same question. Are new environments being automatically deployed into Hyperforce, or do they still fall into some schedule of future migration?
Well, let me double check that and see if I can grab that answer here quick while we're continuing along.
And as a funny story, while you're looking for that, I was at Chase Bank the other day, and he was walking me through my account and all stuff. And I looked at, and they use Salesforce, and I looked at the URL. I'm like, "Look, you're already in Hyperforce." He looked at me funny. I'm like, "Sorry, I'm probably not supposed to know that," but you could tell by the link, the domain, that they had already moved. So he had no idea what I was talking about. Stephen, what's your other question?
My question is with top of rollout being done there, there was some discussion earlier of whether or not Marketing Cloud is already there, or whether that was the future process we were going to have to go through to migrate that.
You were cutting out a little bit. Your question was about Marketing Cloud. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, I was just wondering whether or not Marketing Cloud was already on this architecture, or if we went with Marketing Cloud, that this would be a change we would have to go through at a later point.
For our established Marketing Cloud instance, it will be migrated later. I think it's very similar to the question we have for new deployments. I don't know if Marketing Cloud is at all in Hyperforce or not, and I don't know if Jason's aware. We can find that out.
Great.
And Marlene, regarding your question for like whether Hyperforce is included in new orgs and things like that, as you're aware, we just got Capado installed, and the org for Capado that we went with the governance model install or implementation, and so they created a new Salesforce org on December 26th, actually, of this 2023. And this org is not Hyperforce. So I don't think that they are Hyperforce until I guess they migrate everybody, and then that becomes a standard. But I don't work for Salesforce. I'm just going by what I've experienced.
Did a quick search, and new orgs are not necessarily on Hyperforce. There's a bunch of details in there I would need to dive into, but no, it is not universal, meaning all orgs being created on Hyperforce.
Great questions. Christine, I see a question from you about if you have an international org, would the org still be in the same availability zone? And so if I recall, and Jason, please correct me, you can select where your org is hosted, and that usually is done by your contract, right? Because I know for us, we have requested that our org be in the US. And when our other regions access it, sometimes they have latencies because they're accessing from Fiji, UK, Australia, and so on. But if you have an org in a different region, you can do different region orgs. Jason, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, that is, you do have the ability to, if you have multiple orgs, for instance, and one of your orgs is in a specific spot in Europe, you do have the ability to keep that org or have that org and pick where you would want to have that reside. I did have some folks who had a customer who wanted to make sure that their org was in a specific area in Europe, for instance, and they were able to have it routed to the right area in Hyperforce for that particular area in Europe.
Great. Stuart, what's your question?
Mostly it's just a kudos to you, Marlene. This is a great topic, and you did a great job of hosting this. So I'm co-leader of the architect group here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and our members are asking about this all the time of what's going on with Hyperforce and how do we do Hyperforce. My question for you though is about the slides that you have on the screen right now. Is this something that you built with Salesforce's help, or did they give it to you? Or I'm scouring and searching for this set of slides. I cannot find it. I don't, and having something like this would help our members out quite a bit. And so I don't know, like, what's your magic touch, Marlene?
I'm gonna do a shameless.
How do I get it?
I'm gonna be shameless, and Jason has not paid me for this whatsoever. We have Signature Success Plan, and our technical account manager is amazing. I will always sing her praises, and I've said I always wanted her to keep her as my TAM. She's not allowed to be assigned to any other client. If she's still a TAM, if she gets promoted, by all means, right? Please promote her, don't hold her back. But love her dearly. And so she provided these decks for us. I will post them to, like I said, our meeting page, so you have them. I have permission to do that, so that'll be fine, and then you'll be able to see them. I have found if you go to the preparation links for Hyperforce, there's a ton of content out there about how to prepare for it. I have a feeling some of these are in there, that reduced versions, but these were produced for me by my TAM.
Yeah,
Jason?
this is great. Thank you. I mean, good job with this meeting. Great,
Thank you.
great content.
I'll be honest, I was completely selfish because obviously I'm working on this for my org, right? I'm like, maybe other people want to know about this. And I was really glad a lot of people signed up for this. We had about half of the people show up, which is great. And a lot of people signed up for the meeting and then watch the recording later. So thank you everybody for your questions and your feedback. I agree that this is an interesting topic. And this slide is the one that caught me again when I was working through this because I'm like, wait, what does this mean? And if you're lucky enough to work with an architect, it really makes you understand, is your org documentation up to date? And if not, you're probably going to update it for this project. Anybody else have any questions or comments? I love the discussion. Has anybody here migrated already? I know when people signed up, some of them had, but I don't know if anybody attending has been migrated.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Being new to the group, being new to Salesforce, we haven't deployed yet. In your time with the product, how often have you faced a migration of this magnitude?
I've been through a few changes when you're changing nodes, right? From like right now we're on 164, we're about to change to I think 209. I forget the exact number. I know Daniel told me, but I don't remember. And so that's coming up in the next week or so. During that time period, my org will be read only for 20 minutes, but it's smaller and I don't have to worry about a whole bunch of things. So that has happened. And that tends to be pretty seamless in my experience. I don't know about anybody else's experience, but that's been pretty easy. This is the first time we go through something like this. And I keep teasing about the cloud going to the cloud, but that's really what it is, right? And it is, if you've ever moved data centers, it's a massive project. I can't imagine how large this is for Salesforce.
Yeah, at our organization, I'm at a enterprise financial services organization, and so we've got a lot of integrations in and out of Salesforce, and we've had to move data centers before. What we found helpful is trying to abstract the integrations, use platform events. So think of patterns that allow you to make it up. If you lose connection, there are patterns that let you get those messages again after 72 hours or up to 72 hours. If you miss a message, you can still recall that message back. So we've been trying to abstract our integration and use different patterns to get messages back and forth, to get data back and forth. But you're right, like Marketing Cloud, that's a one-on-one direct connection between Salesforce and Marketing Cloud. Like you can't abstract that unless you're going to build your own integrations. So some of these things are just going to be hard. There's just no way around it. But yeah, there are some tricks and tools that you can use to help you through these sort of things.
Yeah, that's really great, Stuart. And if anybody here has either taken or is studying for their integration certification, that's one of the big things. Like, what are you doing to queue your messages? Who is queuing it? How do you handle error messaging? And just like Stuart, you said, if you can't go with events and do something that's asynchronous, it's you have a little more control. If you do point-to-point integration and you're not thinking of those things, you end up hitting some hard choices later on with how you're integrated between systems. Awesome. Any other questions or comments? You guys have been great.
Thank you for hosting the meeting, presenting this.
Absolutely.
I'm still in Dynamics.
You're still in Dynamics? You'll love Salesforce.
Yeah, this was a great topic and will now give me things to think about as we look at when we're going to go to Hyperforce. Like I said, we deferred once and I'm not sure when would be a good time to do it, but we'll just have to buckle down and do it at some point.
No, that's really great. Thank you. And like I said, next time we'll go back to being hybrid. And I look forward to seeing everybody that usually comes to the meetings in Orlando. And if you're not in Orlando, we really have great AV with the Marriott space that we're in. And so you can still join. You're able to ask questions because everybody can hear you in the room. And it's a really great presentation room. So I hope that you definitely got a lot of this and you join us next time. I'll post the next meeting